Live Fit Podcast, episode 99, with Dr. Richard Oppenlander. Listen as he discusses how our society is comfortably unaware of the damage our food supply is causing our planet, and hence us.
Because most people don't care, but I feel it's more a factor of two levels. One is that they're not aware, which is why I called my first book Comfortably Unaware. But secondly is that there are a number of individuals and organizations that are aware, but they just don't want to move it forward because of a lot of influences, such as political or cultural influences.
He says the condition of our planet is irreversible, but it's not too late for rehabilitation.
One single reason that's most responsible in a comprehensive fashion for all of this global depletion is because of food choice specifically related to animal agriculture.
He says it's the single largest cause of land use and global warming on Earth. Then he goes on to explain how our common thought on proper nutrition for humans is actually hurting us.
All the accolades that were being placed on individuals such as Michael Pollan and Mark Bittman that are considered food gurus, but yet they're moving our public toward unsustainable systems.
Welcome to the Live Fit Podcast with Glenn Johnson, your resource for all things that contribute to good health. You will hear expert advice and interviews with leading authorities on fitness, food, fat loss, mindset, and the mind-body connection. You will find show notes, articles, and health programs at livefitpodcast.com.
Yes, it is time once again for the Live Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Johnson, your guide to better health. Thanks for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and most importantly, share this episode with everybody you care about. Because today I'm speaking with Dr. Richard Oppenlander, a sustainability consultant, researcher, and author whose award-winning book, Comfortably Unaware, has been endorsed as a must-read by Ellen DeGeneres and Dr. Jane Goodall, among others. Dr. Oppenlander's most recent book, titled Food Choice and Sustainability, has won numerous awards and is being used by think tanks and strategists for developing initiatives to advance change. Dr. Oppenlander is a much sought-after international lecturer on the topic of food choice and how it relates to sustainability, and he served as the lead consultant for two full-length environmental documentary films called Cowspiracy and Food Choices. He serves as an advisor to World Hunger projects in developing countries and with municipalities within the United States. Dr. Oppenlander has spent the past 40 years studying the effects food choices have on our planet and on us. He started an organic plant-based food production company, operates an animal rescue sanctuary with his wife, and is the founder and president of the nonprofit organization Inspire Awareness Now. I'd like to thank everybody for supporting the show. If you would like to donate, please go to patreon.com/livefitpodcast, or you can follow the link at the bottom of every show notes page. I'd like to remind you that I offer health coaching, weight management, and health improvement programs. If you have any questions, you can reach me at glenn@livefitpodcast.com, or you can leave a voice message by following the orange tab on the right side of the screen on my website. Now, let's get on with my interview with Dr. Richard Oppenlander. Hello, Dr. Oppenlander. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. In fact, I'm doing so much better now that I know that I'm speaking to somebody who cares about food choice so much, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really do. I find it really fascinating how few people actually care about where their food comes from. Now, remember the movie Food, Inc.? That did a great job of bringing some awareness to the origins of where the food came from, but that movie came out several years ago, and it's pretty much forgotten for a lot of us. Me, as a health instructor, I still bring it to the surface a couple times a year, maybe more than that, with my students and clients. You know, the reason I brought you on this show was to talk about that sort of thing. I saw you on a panel at UCLA, and I really loved what you had to say and thought it was very thought-provoking and super, super important. I want my I want my listeners to hear what you have to say and how their food choices really not only affects their personal health, but the health of this planet. And I personally adore this planet. I want to live here forever, and I want my kids to live here. I want my kids and their kids to see this beautiful, gorgeous ball floating in space the way I did, with the green trees and the beautiful mountains and canyons and clean oceans and the good food that we have to offer. Now, eating is rather confusing for a lot of people, and I'm afraid that after they hear you, there's going to be a little bit more consternation that comes along with that. But hopefully you can shed some light on the end of the tunnel so we don't walk away feeling doom and gloom. But before we get into all that, can you give our listeners an idea of who you are and how you became interested in the sustainability through food of our planet?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. The origins for me started 40 years ago, maybe 42 years ago, when I was in graduate school, and I realized on sort of a micro level what nutrient intakes, how they affected us on more of a cellular level. And so I became very interested in nutrition and from sort of a biochemical physiology standpoint, and therefore at that time changed my dietary patterns so that I became plant-based. I started realizing what type of stressors were coming into our systems and influencing us, and I started realizing I started looking behind the scenes at how our food systems, how our agricultural systems are producing food, and what taxation was occurring on our resources. And again, that was 42 years ago. And I also started becoming a little bit more interested in understanding and aware of how our food systems, what they were doing to animals. And when I talk about animals, I'm not just talking about the ethical aspect or disrespect in terms of domesticated animals that we put on our plates, but I'm talking about the displacement measures that are occurring from the animal agricultural sector. And we can talk more about that when we move into some of those other issues that you've glanced across a little bit at the beginning here. But that was 42 years ago, and I started realizing that up until about 10, 20 years ago, I had been lecturing about the human health aspects of our diet, and especially moving towards a healthier diet, which would be plant-based. And then we started seeing more and more physicians and more practitioners and more documentation, so that I felt that, hey, this subject from a human health standpoint is really quite well covered. Whether you're talking to Joel Fuhrman or Dean Ornish or Neil Barnard or T. Colin Campbell or Esselstyn or McDougall, it's well covered now. So I thought, that really the aspect of the environment, or how our food choices affect the environment, really wasn't being brought to the forefront in the public eye or in the media or to policymakers at all. And then about in the year 2000, 2001, 2002, I started seeing some major changes in terms of public knowledge or lack thereof, which occurred first of all with Al Gore winning the Nobel Peace Prize from his work with climate change, but not mentioning any of the factors whatsoever that were resulting from food choice, which was a shame. And then also all the accolades that were being placed on individuals such as Michael Pollan and Mark Bittman that are considered food gurus, but yet they're moving our public toward unsustainable systems. So then I wrote a book, and then wrote another book, and felt that, until somebody brings this to the forefront, then I guess it's my duty to do this. So that's why I've been now lecturing and creating workshops and trying to make the world a healthier place by way of food choice. And now it's changed a little bit for me, because instead of just creating a degree of awareness, and you created a prelude here for us very nicely, because most people don't care, but I feel it's more a factor of two levels. One is that they're not aware, which is why I called my first book Comfortably Unaware. But secondly is that there are a number of individuals and organizations that are aware, but they just don't want to move it forward because of a lot of influences, such as political or cultural influences, and we can talk about that at any point in time too. But it's a very serious issue now. Instead of just lack of awareness, it's more about timelines that we're on. Like, how long do we really have before we run out of things? And I know most of these timelines, they're evolving, but it's very it's a very difficult issue because it's not being addressed.
I have a slew of questions in my head that I want to get out in the order that you presented them just now. So let's start with your book, Comfortably Unaware. Is it just about that people are unaware of where their food is coming from and they don't care and they're fine with that?
Well, right. The first book is more of it's only a little over 150 pages, 160 pages. It's more of a primer. It's kind of it's an introduction to increasing awareness about our presence on Earth and how it's affecting our environment and other species that we share this planet with, and future species, all species. And so it basically introduces the audience to what I call global depletion, which is the loss of our primary resources on Earth, as well as our own health, as well as climate change or global warming. Those principal aspects of or those life-supporting systems that we cannot live without. And so it's just a basic book that introduces us to that, whereas my second book takes it to another level and explains all those aspects of global depletion, why we're living unsustainably in these various aspects, what the timelines are that we're on, for instance, whether it's freshwater scarcity or land use or climate change or the effect that our food choice has on our oceans, or tropical rainforests, what effect our food choice has, and how long do we have before it becomes irreversible in our lifetime. Those are the critical discussion points that I feel that everyone needs to know, because as a global community, we're all affected, and we all need to be committed to making the world a healthier place, and time is running out in a lot of ways.
So I'm going to ask the billion-dollar question now. How long do we have until it's irreversible?
Well, it's irreversible right now in many ways. For instance, if we split this out into those aspects of global depletion, we basically have climate change or global warming. We have loss of biodiversity, meaning rapid rate of extinctions of other species. We have the condition of or the state of our oceans. We have freshwater scarcity. We have land use. We have world hunger or food security. We have sustainability of our own health, and a small, just a snapshot of our planet today reveals this. So we need to know this first before we can answer that question of yours, and that is that we're running out of land and freshwater. It's predicted that we will have a freshwater scarcity of more than 40%. Freshwater scarcity, but just by the year 2030. Climate change, as you know, is very imminent. There are still some deniers, but basically we have a 2-year window of time from now before it becomes irreversible in our lifetime. Our oceans are becoming acidified and warmed to the point where they are already irreversible in our lifetime right now. We're losing other species in our oceans. It's predicted by a number of scientists that we'll have collapse of all commercially recognized sea life in our oceans. That doesn't mean they're all extinct, but collapse to near extinct status for a number of them by the year 2048. A number of species in our oceans are already to the point where they're not going to reverse out in our lifetime right now. Tropical rainforests are to the point where the tipping points, I call these tipping points, and various timelines that we're on. Our tropical rainforests are being lost at a rate where we can't reverse that out in our lifetime in many aspects. So see, a number of these things we can't reverse out. So the question can be answered that can we change it and flip it around for at least those species that still remain with us. Like, for instance, if you're just talking about that one aspect of global depletion that I call loss of biodiversity or a rapid rate of extinctions, I mean, we're losing other species on Earth at a rate that we haven't seen since the dinosaurs were lost 65 million years ago. We're losing anywhere between 1,000 and 10,000 times the background rate. The reason it's a rate rather than the exact number is because scientists can't keep up with all the loss of species that are occurring right now. And the background rate used to be 2 to 4 species per year, so you can just multiply that out. So those species that are being lost obviously are irreversible. You won't get those back. And the primary reason for this, what weaves the single reason that the largest factor that could be quantified as one single reason that's most responsible in a comprehensive fashion for all of this global depletion is because of food choice specifically related to animal agriculture. It's the single largest cause of use of our land on Earth. Over 45% of all ice-free terrestrial land mass on Earth is used by grazing cattle and crops to feed them. Almost 29% of all of our freshwater consumption on Earth is taken up by livestock. The leading cause or leading risk factor in loss of species and rapid rate of extinction is because of loss of habitat and by displacement by cattle and grazing livestock on land and by overfishing in our oceans. And so you can see this thread that weaves its way through all of this it's the one fact. Sure, there are other industries that contribute, but none have the comprehensive impact. Even with climate change, everybody's pointing their finger at fossil fuel use, but the calculations show that even if we stopped all fossil fuel use today, we would still reach an irreversible point of global warming by the year 2050 just because of our use of livestock. Right now, it's contributing about 14.5% to all anthropogenic or human-induced greenhouse gas emissions that on Earth or globally. And in terms of what we're doing about all these things is really the larger issue. You know, if everyone became aware of all this and we made steps to correct it, it'd be a different story. But as I said, a few minutes ago, there are two different levels here that are problematic. One is that we have this level of being unaware, being comfortably unaware, and then after we become aware, we just aren't doing anything about it within these timelines that I'm talking about. One last thing for the audience to really understand, to grasp this better, is that humans are currently in a state of we're in an overshoot mode, where we're demanding more of our planet's resources than what it can supply. There are all the main scientific bodies know this. And in the United States, for instance, it requires 5 full Earths to sustain our current lifestyle. Globally, it's about 1.7 Earths to supply what we currently are taking from and doing to our planet. And as I said, the single reason for this state of unsustainability, if you could point your finger at one thing that weaves its way comprehensively through all these aspects, is animal agriculture.
Man, that's a lot to chew on. It sounds like doom and gloom. It just sounds so hopeless. But I can understand the attitude that many people have. At first glance, it seems like this planet is overflowing with abundance, at least in many places. And the attitude of the early pioneers here in America was that the bison of the Central Plains were endless. They thought they could never kill them all, and then they almost did. We did, however, due to the same attitude, manage to kill all of the carrier pigeons. And I've heard the same attitude with the trees here as well. But with the advent of machines, and if we really set our mind to it, I'll bet you we could chop them all down in a generation. So there really is an end. And if you look around, it seems like we're trying to deplete things on this planet as quickly as possible. So I'm wondering, what's the chance of this actually turning around the momentum and the attitude? I know you're doing what you can, and I'm promoting your work as well, but what do you think the chances are of us actually changing this and turning things around for the better? Because there's a lot of people out there that really love their beef.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So let's split that out a little bit. Let's first talk about we don't want to wake up in the morning thinking that it's all doom and gloom. There's nothing that we can do, because actually every single person on Earth has the ability to save lives. They have the ability to save their own life through eating plant-based products, whole plant-based foods, especially organically grown. And they also have the opportunity to save lives in terms of what I just mentioned. If they can make a large difference by being not only collectively what they're doing with their own plates, but also being role models and influencing, educating, if you want to call it that, but influencing and educating all those around them. And so, yes, we can turn this around to the point where that climate change can be mitigated. Instead of just adapting to climate change, we can actually mitigate it, and we can also reduce this tremendous amount of resource inefficiencies by simply changing out our food choice. And we can do it today. It's something as simple as food choice. Look, so many people are pointing their fingers at fossil fuel use and at waste and the need to recycle and overpopulation. But the fact remains is that we can't, as individuals and even as policymakers, or organizations or businesses or educators, whatever category you want to look at, we are not going to be doing much about overpopulation. Okay, we're not going to be going out and culling other humans. Okay, so population control is nice to talk about, but we're not going to be able to turn things around by modifying our population. The second aspect is fossil fuel use, and as I mentioned, even if we stopped all fossil fuel use today, it wouldn't have any bearing whatsoever on the fact that we're unsustainably fishing our oceans, or that we're cutting down tropical rainforests, or that we're displacing all other species just by grazing livestock, or by freshwater scarcity, because 29% of all freshwater consumption in the world is going to livestock. So even if we stopped fossil fuel use so we wouldn't be able to point our fingers at that, we would still be in a state of unsustainability, and reversing that out means that if we immediately changed what's on our plate today, all of us, we could see a tremendous change. Now, you mentioned something that of course stands in the way, and that is that whether we are aware or unaware, and whether we become aware and then just simply don't want to change. So many people, because of their cultural or economic or political bias, they just don't want to change. They want to continue propagating animal agriculture. I was the same way. So I was that way 40 years ago. But I often say in my lectures or workshops that I was raised on a Midwestern meat and potato type of diet, and if I can change, anybody can change, and that's the way we need to look at this. We also need to look at the fact that underlining this whole thing is the fact that we are on timelines, very real timelines. In fact, there are a couple different institutes that have been, with a number of scientists that have been observing this and writing about it over the last few years, and that is that there are 9 recognized planetary boundaries or tipping points, very similar, the categories that I just mentioned. And this scientific body, one of them in particular, has identified the fact that we've surpassed 5 of them already, and which means we're in a state of irreversibility in those 5 planetary boundaries out of 9, and all of them are interconnected. When one starts to collapse, the others will soon follow. So the issue is, when you have an enormous amount of people that want to, as you said, continue eating animals and perpetuating animal agriculture, it becomes an issue to the point where we all need to do what we can to educate those around us, support policy change, recognize these things that I'm talking about, and then commit to making a change and commit to educating those around you. One thing that we need to keep an eye on, and that you mentioned you had viewed that one of the panels that I've been on, is that we have a great task ahead of us, because even those that are in educated positions, I mean, those, for instance, that are on the panel with me, we're talking about in academia, we have professors, we have members of various organizations. They're all moving to this middle ground, which is, instead of moving from a tremendously resource inefficient animal agriculture, taking our resources and using them inefficiently to create animals that we then put on our plates, instead of using our resources in a tremendously efficient manner, I call that reaching a level of optimal sustainability. Instead of going right to plant-based foods, they're moving and promoting the advancement or evolution to grass-raised animals or livestock or pasture raised or humane pasture raised, and that's a serious issue because in many ways grass-fed livestock are more unsustainable than grain-fed, and so this is a very serious problem. Even with sustainable seafood, there is no such thing as sustainable seafood as defined by the industry itself, even defined by Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch and the Marine Stewardship Council. If you look at the three objectives of how they term sustainable, it's impossible, not improbable. It's impossible for them to be able to have any seafood be truly sustainable. So those are the issues that we're dealing with. Is that we have to be committed to educating ourselves, and I call it educating the educated, because there's so many people in influential positions of platforms that they can influence other people, and those are the ones that need to be educated and then push for policy change. And those are and yes, so then we can turn this around. So in our lifetime, we will have resources that will not only support us but support future generations. So one way to look at this, Glenn, is that we're not only borrowing, we're stealing resources from future generations because we're going to be running out of resources. As I mentioned earlier, we're essentially we're in an unsustainable mode right now, and so there's no other way to really look at it. That if animal agriculture requires between 10 to 100 times more water to produce 1 pound of animal products versus 1 pound of many types of plant-based foods, and it requires 18 times to 50 times the land, and it produces anthropogenic greenhouse gases. So in other words, it contributes to climate change rather than mitigating it by sequestering greenhouse gases, which are what plants do. Plants take carbon dioxide and methane out of the atmosphere and sequesters it into the soil. So instead of using these tremendously inefficient means of agriculture with this middle system of taking our resources and producing animals that then have to be slaughtered to then put on our plates, we just need to use our resources as efficiently as possible, the finite amount that we have on Earth, and to produce food in the most optimally sustainable fashion possible. And yes, then we can be sustainable. There's no question about it. Not only sustainable, but at this stage we need to rejuvenate. We're beyond the need for even sustainability. It's kind of an overused word. I mean, I use it, but we need to start viewing things and how can we regenerate? How can we rejuvenate our planet now? How can we rejuvenate ourselves? How can we rejuvenate those species around us that we've depleted to the point of no return?
Well, we can't. If they're gone, they're gone. But certainly rehabilitation is in there. Now, I'd like to talk about cattle. You mentioned that grass-fed cattle use more water than grain-fed cattle. Can you explain why this is? And is our cattle the worst offenders on the planet for the health of the planet? Or how do chickens and pigs fit in?
Yep, great question. Right now, sure, there's those that want to promote animal agriculture will tell you, will propose that we just move into more efficient animals, but there's no animal agriculture that's as efficient for resource use as plant-based. And let's just start. So that's the first step, is to understand that you're depleting our resources regardless of what animal is being used. Cattle are the most inefficient, but all animals that you raise, whether it's grass-fed or not, are using food that we could be eating directly, and using land that we could be using directly, and using water that we could be using directly to produce food for humans, rather than to go through this middle entity, which are animals. So to answer the first part of your question, grass-fed or pasture-raised livestock are less sustainable than grain-fed because they use more land. In some cases, it requires 5, 10, on average, 2 acres, but I've seen some areas in the world that I visited and interviewed that require 20 to 50 acres to produce one grass-fed cow, and it takes maybe 2 to 3 years minimally for that cow. And so it may produce about 50 to 100 pounds of something that some people call food, which is meat. But on that same acre of land, you might be able to produce 5,000 to 10,000 pounds of a plant-based food. And the ratios vary depending on what plants you're producing. But also grass-fed livestock produce more greenhouse gas emissions, sometimes up to 3 times as much for grass-fed as to grain-fed for methane production. They use more fresh water in terms of all fresh water across the board, not just irrigation, but also rainwater. They use, in some cases, 5 times more water than what's used for grain-fed livestock. And of course, when you use more land, you create more biodiversity loss, and there's a higher feed conversion ratio, meaning that it takes more food to produce 1 pound of grass-fed beef than it does 1 pound of grain-fed. But keep in mind that grain-fed animal products of any sort are still tremendously less efficient with resources than just going directly to plant-based systems.
So how do you feel about dairy and eggs? Do you recommend people go vegan, or is vegetarian okay?
No, I'll tell you what. It's interesting because I'll answer that in a couple different ways. One is that it's not healthy for our environment, and it's not healthy for the individual as just a human species to be consuming any type of animal product for a number of reasons. From a human health aspect, you are essentially, and you can speak to any of those physicians I mentioned at the onset here about this, and the literature is replete now with all the explaining all the benefits of plant-based diet. But basically, you're introducing so many inflammatory stressors and pollutants and into your body by consuming any animal product, and especially dairy. Dairy is a concentrated form of animal products. But also eggs. It's been shown, there are a number of documents showing that, literature showing that, consuming eggs creates inflammation in your cardiovascular system equivalent to X amount of maybe 2 to 5 cigarettes that you're smoking. And so you can look all these up. You can look at, especially, you can research nutritionfacts.org, Dr. Greger's work, who's also a fine researcher. But from an environment standpoint, any animal product is depleting our resources more so in an unsustainable fashion than just going directly to plant-based systems. And then also there's the humane aspect. I mean, this thought that, and I know that there's a movement towards humanely raised animals, but the dairy industry, whether it's grass-fed or not, have some of the most inhumane conditions, and similarly with the cage-free systems that I know California is moving towards, and a number of other states are as well. So from a human health standpoint, from a humane standpoint, and especially from an environmental standpoint, it makes no sense whatsoever to consume animal products, especially if you know these timelines we're on. I often say that, it doesn't matter how healthy we are if our planet's not healthy. So we need to all start becoming more aware and then moving in the direction of optimal sustainability. And as I said, we all need to be thinking about how we can rejuvenate our planet. And the best way possible to do that is to move entirely to plant-based foods.
So veganism.
It is. That's right. And you can call it whatever you want. That someone has usually I'll have someone ask me that at about every lecture, stating, well, so the bottom line, Dr. O, is that you want everybody to become vegan. And my answer is, you can call it whatever you want. I'm not asking everyone to become vegan. What I'm asking for is, I think it's inherent upon every human that walks this planet that they look at the footprint they have, especially their ecological footprint. What are they doing to our planet? What are they doing collectively as a whole? What are our species? What is our species doing to our planet from an environmental standpoint? What's our ecological footprint? And is it irreversible or not? And how can we best reduce that footprint for our sake, for the other species we share this planet with, and for future generations? And the only way to do it, or the best way to do it in the most sustainable fashion, is going entirely plant-based. So whatever they want to call it, I mean, my role right now, Glenn, is to try to create an educational platform so that everyone becomes they're empowered. They're empowering themselves, and they're empowering those around them with the knowledge of what we're doing to our planet and how to best use our resources. And so whatever they want to call their newfound awareness or their path, their new evolutionary path through life, they can call it. But I think it's inherent upon all of us to become a wise steward of our planet and to do it today.
Well, that's great. I get it. I think that's wonderful. But what would you recommend if, let's say, somebody listening to this wants to do their part by spreading the word and the person they're speaking with doesn't believe them? They could think it's some political conspiracy dreamt up by the bleeding heart liberals or something like that. And they respond with something like, yeah, well, me going vegan isn't really going to help things. Even if my whole family goes vegan, even if everybody I know goes vegan, that's not going to make a difference. And maybe nothing will make a difference. So why bother? Yeah, that was my accent of somebody who doesn't believe in this stuff. I don't know. Sorry about that. But how do you convince people who have this attitude that this is really, really real? Because face it, most people won't bother with something until it directly affects them. And things often don't seem real until there's actually a disaster. What do you say?
No, that's real true. And that's something that I'm battling every single day, especially when I speak with policymakers. I was asked to speak to the European Parliament a few months back and speak to the various Senate groups. And it seems like that is exactly the problem we have at hand, because it likely will be to the point of almost no return before we get everyone to change. But I believe that we have an opportunity to change before that point. And so the way that I like to view this is that we have to educate first and provide education. So when you've mentioned those people who feel like it just, what's the use? I feel like the first step isn't really that. The first step is I believe that most people on Earth are not aware. I know that. So we have to provide the platform of education. For instance, I'll give you just a very brief example of all the ones out there on the West Coast that are occurring, because I've been involved in I've been very fortunate to be a consultant for a number of documentaries that are coming out. One was called Cowspiracy. I don't know if you saw that. Another one that I would encourage all of your listeners to watch is called Food Choices. It was produced and directed by a wonderful Emmy-nominated director and producer, and it's just available right now on iTunes and a few other locations. But look for that as Food Choices, and this will help with this educational process. But a good example on the West Coast is that in December of 2015, San Diego elected to have a desalination plant placed because they're running out of fresh water in California, as we all know. They're in their 6th year of drought, and so it costs $1 billion, and it provides fresh water. It takes water out of our oceans, desalinates it in about a ratio of 2 to 1 from seawater to drinking water. And it provides water for about 10% of the human population of that area. Well, the electricity that's required for that is enough to support the needs of 30,000 homes. Okay, now the reason I'm mentioning this is because the state of California, if they were aware of the fact that 60 to 70% of their fresh water is being used for livestock, okay, and that most of the water that is consumed by the families in California is going to livestock. In fact, my calculations have shown that up to 96% of the freshwater footprint for indoor use of those people in California, 96% can be attributed to what can be found on their plate in terms of animal products or livestock. So if they would have spent $1 billion in San Diego instead of a desalination plant, just to educate the policymakers and the general public of San Diego to switch from to eliminate entirely meat and dairy from their diet, they could have saved up to 96% of their water instead of the 10% that they're using that are supplied to the human population, and at a much less of a cost. So those are some of the examples that I'm speaking about, where we need to educate first, and then once we educate, then to be an example, and then to push for policy change, be an advocate for this, and then I think everybody can feel much better about what they're doing and that they actually can make a difference, because we have to do this in a collective manner, globally, to educate, to move forward. You're right. We will never do it with just a few isolated pockets.
Yes, I agree. It's a tough challenge. And I think one of our main targets would be school-age children, because they're the ones that are going to be inheriting this earth that we trash. Now, I remember when I was a school age in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, I was taught about recycling and many other things, and they told us the exact same thing. And so I really learned to recycle at a very early age, and it is such a part of my life. I can't imagine not recycling. And I was able to convince my parents the value in recycling, and they still recycle to this day. So word spread. It started with my teacher and spread down to me, which spread to my parents, and I don't know how many they've spread it to. And I also remember when smog and emissions controls were coming into play on cars. I grew up outside of Los Angeles in the 70s, and whenever we would go down below, we would drive through this thick smog bank. It looked like fog, but it burned your eyes and your nose and your throat and your lungs. You could feel it. You could taste it. It was ugly. You couldn't see the sunshine. It looked like sunset all the time, but like a brownish, ugly sunset. But now you drive into LA, and it's not bad at all. I mean, you can see the smog and even feel it a little bit, but it's nothing like it was in the 70s. So this stuff actually works. If we change our habits and we change our ways and change our policies, we can turn things around.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I think it's really important. For instance, we're developing an ambassador program right now through my nonprofit group called Inspire Awareness Now. And I think it's aptly named, but but we're going to have an ambassador program. It's just beginning probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're just developing it right now, where we're going to have an academy online learning courses. And one of the objectives is just what you said, is to make sure we have a course it's going to be an age-related course where we're going to be able to have an educational base for K through 12, preschool K through 12, and then postgraduate learning, and also college and university learning. And so I think it's going to be very important to develop this program and to spread the word and try to get as many people as possible involved.
I think that is fantastic. I'm going to have a link to that, as well as other links discussed in this show where people can reach you on my show notes page at livefitpodcast.com. You certainly have given me and my listeners a lot to think about, Dr. Oppenlander. Whether we change our habits or not will remain to be seen. I personally am going to tighten mine up. So thank you once again for your time. I really appreciate your information and your insight and your warning.
Well, Glenn, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. And I think, to end on a sort of a final note, I can say that it's because of the timelines and tipping points we're on. We need to start looking outside of self a little bit. We all tend to get tied up in all those fires that are in front of us. But it's really time we start looking outside of self at our effect on others. And in doing so, I always say that we all can be superheroes. We all can be beyond heroes, because we're going to be saving lives. And I think it's the greatest way to approach our lives individually is to know that you're doing everything you can to live the healthiest possible life for yourself, for other species, for your family, for your community, for other species we share this planet with, and for future generations. So it's a wonderful way to do this when we feel so. In many cases, we feel so isolated that we can't do something about a really important topic in the world, but this is the most important topic we have, and we all can do something about it. And so thank you, Glenn, for your help and for all your work. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Let's leave this planet better than we found it, all right?
That's right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Live Fit Podcast. Please subscribe and share with someone you care about. Read show notes, articles, resources, and learn more about our weight management programs at livefitpodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and always remember to live fit.